Forward. So welcome to this evening with LifeCanada Presents, and tonight we are hosting Cathay Wagantall, and we're so pleased to have you, Cathay. I'm sure you're exhausted. You're busy in the house this week with your bill, and we're going to get right to that. I want to just do a quick introduction. Cathay was elected in 2015 as a member of Parliament of
Yorkton,
Melville in Saskatchewan for the Conservative Party of Canada. Through her parliamentary work, Cathay has stood up for the most vulnerable in society and worked to defend and protect the fundamental rights and freedoms of conscience, religion, belief, and expression. She's a member of the Interparliamentary Committee on Ending Human Trafficking in Canada, as well as the Parliamentary Pro-Life Caucus. In 2015, she tabled the private member's bill known as Casey and Molly's Law, which sought to protect mothers and their preborn children. Now she has introduced her second private member's bill, the Sex Selection Abortion Act, that we'll be discussing tonight and is being debated in the House this week. So thank you so much for taking the time, Cathay, to talk to us about this bill. And I wanted to just give you an opportunity just to tell us a little bit about your career and how you became involved in politics.
All right. Well, thanks, Natalie. Thanks all of you for being here this evening. It's a real pleasure for me. My first thoughts of politics were many, many years ago. I was in grade 6 when Canada had its centennial. And we were given this wonderful book about Canada, as well as a gold-covered Gideon Bible, the New Testament that they used to hand out in schools. And it just really twigged my interest. I thought, wow, wouldn't that be something to serve my country that way? Of course, I was very young then, and many, many years later, life goes on. And I often tell young women who come to the Hill to talk about serving as a woman in politics, you know, you can do it all. You just don't have to do it all at once. And I certainly chose to raise my kids, and I worked alongside my husband, planting churches as a second career. And so as the kids grew up and left home to go to university and college, I had an opportunity when the two conservative parties came together to be on a board, and I decided I would take it on at that point in time. So that was in 2004.
Right.
And I'm an experiential learner, so I just did everything I could to learn about politics by serving on different committees and things, and ended up serving to be a campaign manager. And that's when I started to realize, you know, if this is something I really had a heart to do, we're a democracy, and in Canada, you can put your heart to this and work really hard and possibly have that opportunity. So I tried the first time in Edmonton and lost on the nomination by 4 votes on the first ballot, and the individual who won by 2 on the second. So folks were so gracious. They said, "Oh, Cathay, you know, God has a plan for you. This just isn't the time." And I would joke and say, "Well, I don't know. I hear him saying, really, Cathay, like 4 votes, you know?" But God did have a plan. We moved home because my dad got sick and ended up in Saskatchewan, back at home. And Gary Breitkreitz was the member. We knew them well. And he decided he wanted to retire, but didn't want to retire until there was someone who had the same Christian values as him who would consider running. And of course, long story short, in 2016, I was able to win the nomination in the campaign, and I'm serving in my second term.
Fantastic. That's amazing. And it's wonderful to hear you be open about your faith. You know, in our culture today, there tends to be a desire to want to downplay that, while other faith and other perspectives are very much brought out into the forefront. So that's really wonderful to see your courage and your being able to continue on in something like that and not giving up. As a woman in politics, do you find that you have sort of specific insight into issues that perhaps men are less inclined to perceive? And with that, you've brought to the forefront Casey and Molly's Law. And now you're bringing another one that's sort of a related issue. Is there a correlation between these issues, and do you think because you're a woman you have more footing, let's say, to bring these to the forefront?
Sure. Well, first of all, I have to really think about that, quite honestly, is in regards to comparison to the men that I serve alongside. You know, it's interesting seeing how people behave in the House of Commons. Yeah, there's some characteristics that pass between the two genders that I didn't think could, and they
Mm,
certainly do. The level of rudeness, those types of things that can happen in the House, as I experienced yesterday to some degree. You
okay.
know, um, what I would say there's a big difference between is the hearts of those who have a Christian faith and those who don't.
Mhm.
That's where I see we have a real opportunity, and I was certainly encouraged actually by my good friend Harold Albrecht when I first came on as a member of parliament to realize as a believer I simply had to do what God was calling me to do, and then we
Mhm.
have to leave it in his hands. There's
Mhm.
so many circumstances here where you could easily not get any sleep.
Mhm.
And so, as believers, it's really something for us to serve side by side. When it comes to Cassie and Molly's law, and now doing this particular bill, sex selective abortion, definitely an advantage to be a woman presenting it in the House,
Yeah.
because unfortunately, our guys, I mean, they face so much, counter value now
Mhm.
in every way, and of course, it would be even harder, I think, for them to bring a bill forward that was in relation to a woman in pregnancy and abortion.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's look at this issue of sex selection abortion. I've been reading this woman, Mara Hisvendal.
Hmm.
She writes, she has a Pulitzer Prize winning book called Unnatural Selection. And we're looking at this issue where around the world, there's something like 160 million missing women.
Right.
And to put that in perspective, she actually uh, looks at the AIDS issue. And she says the AIDS issue took the lives of 25 million people. And yet, what we hear is that, we look at, and I actually just want to quote from her book. She says,
Sure.
if we were to actually compare the two to gauge the relative lack of interest in the female deficit, when you look at AIDS, there has been 1/4 of the global spending on health has been put towards AIDS. AIDS has the attention of non-governmental organizations, policymakers, and school children. It boasts its own United Nations agency. Sex selection remains mostly invisible, however, a more pervasive and yet quieter epidemic,
Hmm.
observed only by demographers scrutinizing birth registration records years after the fact. So it's a really, actually, a very, very important issue. And you think you would have total bipartisan support on this issue. And it's hard to believe that it actually would happen in Canada. Have you had evidence of these abortions actually happening in Canada? Um,
Sure. Yeah, there is evidence, but it's evidence that you extrapolate because there's no
mhm,
requirements or any regulations or laws that say that you have to keep a record of how many abortions are taking place, which genetic sex it is when the child, the age, anything like that. So the
right.
way that the studies have taken place is through the Canadian Medical Association did some studies 2012, 2016, looking at ethnic communities, and there were ethnic researchers involved as well. And that was where they could extrapolate, okay, based on the number of boys being born versus girls, this is where they could see that there was a trend, that
Mhm,
especially after one or two girls, that
mhm,
those variances were very, very high. And so they
mhm,
recognize that there is a growing problem in Canada in this regard. However, it's not just within those ethnic communities that have that culture that says you must have a boy child. In Canada, there's other reasons, and there is the concept of the designer family.
Mm-hmm.
A wealthy
Right.
couple, they want a beautiful boy and a beautiful girl, right? And
Right.
so that too is a circumstance that does take place,
That's
but it
right.
is very difficult. Dr. Williams, during my press conference, I believe she mentioned there that it's they think around 2,000 baby girls a year that are aborted because they're girls in Canada.
Right. Right. And another, just going back to this issue of how serious it is
Mhm.
worldwide. Here in Canada, we do talk about it sort of in terms of a looking at it from an equality perspective.
Okay.
This is considered gender-based violence, and we can address sex selection abortion. Um, Not just based on these kinds of things, though. I think we do need to address it as an abortion issue. One of the things that Mara Hisvendal noted in her book was that sex selection abortions may sometimes correlate with other sexist practices, but she noted that it always correlates with readily available abortion. And I think this is a really important point. The practice has increased exponentially as our medical practices have become more modern. So I know you look at
Mhm.
it from both perspectives, but I think in Canada, really, and I've heard you say this, we want to be at the forefront of the human rights issues. And how can we sort of do that when we have our own gender-based violence?
Exactly. And that's very much part of the premise of my bill is that if we value human rights and we have a feminist prime minister and we indicate that, equality between men and women is a high priority for us, well, then clearly there's a, it, there's an inconsistency there if we're not prepared to take that stance on behalf of baby girls at the earliest stages of life. So that's very much an argument that I've used and presented as well when I debated yesterday, that we can't say one thing and do another. And
Mhm.
then also, this government in the past did bring in a sex selective bill in regards to in vitro fertilization, which of course
Yeah.
there's all kinds of dynamics around that as well. But
Mhm.
for some reason, they indicated that it was illegal to uh, make a choice of the embryo based on the sex. And of course,
Mhm.
people think, well, you can't determine that till you're how many months into the pregnancy and you go get an ultrasound. But of course, we all know that at this moment of conception, that genetic sex is
Medically.
determined
Mhm.
genetically, right?
Mhm.
And if at the embryo stage, they can even try to influence that, that's illegal. Well, then how can we not make it illegal to have an abortion simply on the basis of the sex of the child?
Mhm.
So I faced a lot of anger yesterday in the House because they're seeing that we're using the terms human rights and value of equality between men and women and this type of thing, and they feel like we're taking away their platform, right? When actually what we're doing is revealing that this is an issue that needs to be taken care of.
Yeah,
Mhm.
very much so. The polling actually has been very conclusive on this as
Mhm.
well. You are very much in line, I think, with the values of Canadians. We
Mhm.
at Life Canada have done a number of polls on this particular issue, and we found that sex selection abortions, so this was a poll that we ran, sex selection abortions should be, we asked whether they should be legal or not legal.
Mhm.
92% of respondents, and this is a large
Yeah.
cohort that we were looking at,
Okay.
92% said they should not be legal.
Yeah.
And then in 2019, we ran another poll that found that only 2% of Canadians would support sex selection abortion.
Wow.
So, you've quoted some polling in
Mhm.
your work. I think, again, this should be a no-brainer, particularly, in our culture now and the way that we have rhetoric and we have an understanding about the equality of men and women. But the
Mhm.
polling certainly does support your position.
Yes, and it was helpful. This particular one, the Dart and Maru blue poll that was quoted in the National Post, they couldn't argue that. A lot of times they'll try to claim that, well, because you're a pro-life organization, you've somehow skewed these results, right?
Right.
And so it just reaffirms what you found out and continue to find out. The vast majority of Canadians do not want this. And in that particular poll, it indicated that, first of all, the majority of Canadians wanted the laws to stay the way they are. But then as you dig down and get more specific in what you're asking them, they suddenly realize, well, wait a minute, what are you saying? Sex selection abortion happens in Canada? At which point they obviously said 84% said no, it should be illegal. And that's what I faced when I do my trade shows back in the day before COVID. I would always take petitions with me to my table and something on firearms, because I'm from Saskatchewan, and on palliative care and sex selective abortion. And these people would walk right up to the table and say, I want sex selective abortion to be available in Canada. I'd say, oh, so sex selection abortion? They go, well, of course not. No, that's not allowed. And then I would have to explain to them there's no laws. And I never had anyone who didn't turn then and sign that petition.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had any support from feminist or gender equality groups?
That's a very good question. And I have a great answer. Before COVID, I had one opportunity to get into a college where they were doing a women's and gender study class, and they had asked me to come to talk about being a woman in politics. So I went expecting that would be the focus. However, I had also just tabled my bill in the House. So all of a sudden, that became the topic. That's what they wanted to discuss. And I thought, oh my goodness, how's this going to go? And, we talked about it the whole evening, and they were absolutely appalled as feminists to think that sex selective abortion was legal in Canada.
Yeah.
So it's definitely hitting a chord across the country. Yeah.
Right. So tell us a little bit about the bill itself, how your bill plans to actually address this issue. And we know the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada has issued an official statement, and I have it here. They do not support termination of pregnancy on the basis of gender.
That's
right.
right.
So again, there's a lot of support for this in all walks of life. So how does your bill, how are you proposing that it's going to work? Will it give medical professionals a law to point to refuse to perform them?
Right. So what it does is it makes it a criminal offense for a medical practitioner to perform an abortion knowing that the purpose of the abortion is solely based on the sex of the child. So it is a criminal offense if they were to do that, knowing that that was the reason that abortion was being requested. They could face 5 years in prison or up to 18 months for a summary offense. And I, of course, face the flack back. Oh, you're criminalizing doctors. How terrible that is, right? However, the truth of the matter is, and Dr. Williams mentioned this as well in my press conference, she's from Calgary and an amazing physician. She just said, that, and Tabitha with We Need a Law as well, doctors want tools and frameworks. And clearly, as you've mentioned, this is something that the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, as well as our colleges of physicians and surgeons, want support to not have to do this. So there is work on the side of ultrasounds. In the Lower Mainland, the partner can't go in with the woman to see the ultrasound because it's become such an issue there, where they realized they're doing this to determine the sex. And if it's a girl, they know what's going to happen. So there is that criminalizing portion there. Can it be enforced? Any of these laws are very difficult to enforce. As an example, W5 did a sting on a clinic where they sensed that it was truly actually just an abortion clinic specifically for sex selection. And they were undercover and did discover all of this. But of course, we have no law. So if you don't have a law, you can't do anything about it criminally, right? And it also doesn't deter. And of course, we have people coming to Canada that love the thought of being here, but are bringing cultural behaviors with them that they don't even necessarily want them to continue, but it is so ingrained. So we need these opportunities to say that this is actually illegal. So the second part of the bill actually indicates that the Minister of Health, the federal Minister of Health, is to work with her counterparts in the provinces, along with the medical bodies, to create a framework for how this information would be provided from the physician to the individual requesting an abortion. So there's room there for them to basically set up some means of having that information available so that they know that sex-selective abortion is illegal in Canada. So it doesn't ask the woman to indicate on a piece of paper why she's having her abortion, but it puts it forward clearly that this is not acceptable practice. And for the majority of doctors, they also have that opportunity to, they're constantly evaluating and can sometimes, sense possibly why that individual is coming, and they may share that information, in which case they have that to stand on and to say that they're not prepared to do that abortion.
Yeah.
But it is difficult to enforce.
It is, yeah. And I think, I remember once hearing a story of a politician. She'd actually been the Governor General of Canada with prior to legalization of abortion itself. She had found out she was pregnant with twins. And I always remember her writing, was an article about her life in Maclean's magazine, that had abortion been legal, her twins might not be here. Somehow we see a law as an infringement, but really it actually gives us, it gives power to people to actually make good decisions.
The right decision.
Yeah, it is something on which we can stand.
Well, and it's a value. It's saying what your values are, right, as a country. And I've had young women who chose to go and have an abortion, and we went and talked with them, and they said, no, it's not wrong. It's legal.
Yes, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And when you have that sense, of course, that's backwards. Our
Yeah.
laws should be based on our morals, not the other way around,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So, but there's lots of things that we have laws on. Drunk driving laws have not eradicated drunk driving.
Right.
Right. And so that's part of my rationale for people too. Female genital mutilation. The government tried to remove that from our citizen book, and people just went, no, that needs to be there. People need to know we don't accept this. So there's a law. Well, how do you enforce that? Very difficult. But our laws have a purpose beyond enforcing. It's also to say, this is what we value in this country. And if you're coming here, you need to know that. If you're born in this country, you need to know that. And internationally, you need to know that this is what's really important to us. So that's, of course, a huge part of it as well.
That's right. And how have you been receiving any kind of support bipartisanly across party lines on this bill?
After last night, I'm fairly confident there's going to be majorly whipped votes across everywhere, but on our particular side of the floor.
Right.
I do know of individuals that definitely should be standing up and voting their conscience. And of course, that's part of it as well, that, private members' bills, a lot of times in the House, it seems to me, people don't take advantage of that opportunity, because it's your privilege and your right to present whatever it is that you feel Canadians need or are asking for that may not be part of anyone's platform, and should be something that we really need to debate, but isn't necessarily being debated. And then, of course, for us as well, we get to vote our conscience, and we debate within our caucus everything that comes our way. And so I do feel that another purpose here is to show Canadians that we've got to stop this veto of discussion in their government on issues that are difficult to deal with because it's not politically astute to do so.
Right. Yeah, the freedom of speech is so important, not just out in civil society, but in government settings, where you should be able to debate these issues, and it benefits us as a society as a whole. I want to, are there any other comments that you wanted to leave us with, Cathay, before I turn it over to questions?
Sure. Let me think. Oh, the other thing I would mention is I was just so pleased to get 2 letters of support. One from the Vedic Hindu Society of British Columbia, and the
Wow.
other one from the National Sikh Community, indicating that they really supported this bill and wanted to see it move forward because we have a duty, one of them said, to protecting preborn girls, and
Mhm.
also for the way that it would improve our human rights stance on the world stage, because they
Right.
know we have no laws, only us and North Korea.
Mhm, mhm.
This blows me away,
It
right?
does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's wonderful to hear. We've got some questions here. So this is from an anonymous attendee saying, from the pro-life perspective, if this bill passes, what positive consequences or potential evolutions within our law can you potentially foresee within the pro-life movement?
Right. You know, I just so appreciate every organization and church and group that are working on this issue because it's so important. What I'm excited about is that this particular bill on sex selective abortion has the support across the entire country. In other words, as it was said in the National Post article, Canadians not polarized on this issue the way, let's face it, a lot of the mainstream media and political parties that use it as a tool want you to think. And
Mhm,
so we have an opportunity to build bridges. And, we talk to ourselves, it's like, you're preaching to the choir. We say this to ourselves often in our own caucus, where you all think the same way, but it's all those other people who don't think the way you do that need to have their minds and their hearts changed. So, how do we do that? And I know that even with Cassie and Molly's law, it didn't pass because even back when I think it was Ken Epp presented it the very first time, Joyce Arthur, who's kind of the queen of the pro-choice, I now call her pro-abortion
mhm.
group.
Right.
She said, we can't support this, even though it was a public safety bill, because it
Mhm.
will wake up the consciences of Canadians,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
And so I believe that this will do that. And there are other issues that we can approach as well that would find support within that critical mass. And a lot of them Leslyn Lewis brought forward in her leadership race, which I totally, resonated with. And the media couldn't challenge her on them because they are things that the majority of Canadians resonated with. And
Mm,
so we can move in that way. When it comes to that decision to completely outlaw abortion altogether, um, I'm not sure if and when that will happen when you look at the whole world stage,
mhm,
but I know there are ways to make a difference that cause people to change. And
mhm,
that is through really solid, amazing family policies as well. When you get to that certain point, why are people choosing to do this?
mhm,
And Hungary is a wonderful example of that.
mhm,
That country in the middle of the European Union is a Christian country, and
mhm,
they have values that they are implementing as a government. But of course, Mr. Soros is from there and he owns that university and all these dynamics. So they didn't take a head on approach, where you fight over things. As an example, and this is out there, they said, carry on with what you're doing with your university. But what they did is added a huge department on marriage and the family
mhm,
to that
mhm,
institution. They
mhm,
started to say, you can run your own school, but you have to meet these criteria for education. And if you do, you can also teach your faith.
mhm.
And then they are rewarding couples who marry, man and a woman,
Yes, and have
to have
children.
3 children in the course
Mhm,
of 10 years, a down payment on a home, a line of credit. They pay only whatever the tax is for their particular income level. And if they're at the average level, they don't pay any income tax. They have a very high GST there. And then now they've added to that, if they have a 4th child, the government buys them a van.
wow.
Yeah, I know. We have to be careful because our children will all want to move to Hungary, right? Like my kids are ready to go kind of thing. But there's ways that, and as a result, when I've been there, the streets are teeming with young families at night. They've got their
Yes.
strollers out there, and you see that it's making a very
A
significant
difference.
difference.
Mhm,
And that's what I would like to see us move towards as well.
mhm,
Is now, of course, we're Canada, we're not Hungary. They have 10 million people. We're a different dynamic. But there's many things that we
mhm,
could offset this mentality that's out there that I can't afford to have my children, as an example.
mhm.
I'm of the generation, one of 6 kids, 1.5 bathrooms. You never had a bedroom to yourself. There's so many things that I think society has really lost its focus on.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll see it demographically speaking. I mean, you go to some of these countries. I traveled through Ireland with my
Mhm.
husband at one point, and we were just amazed at the families we were seeing and the children in the streets. And
Yeah.
then we come home to our North American society, and there's nobody around
You're
on
right.
the streets. It just
Yeah. And
you
everybody's fenced in,
yeah. And you don't
right?
know your neighbors. You
Yeah.
rarely speak to them, and it's all quiet and
Yeah.
big houses. And but the long-term effects of these policies are very, very serious and affect us globally.
Yeah.
And when you read what's happening with sex selection, abortion around the world, I mean, the the author I was quoting tonight, she calls it an epidemic,
Yeah.
and that word means a lot more to us these days. But really, we're going to be feeling the effects of these policies.
Sure. Well, China did.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was intentional, but now they have a sex selective law. I don't want to use them as an example of why to ever do it, but the truth of the matter is you have those imbalances. And then also, there is that sense that there is a desire to see population control. And of course, you do that through eliminating the child bearers, lowering family member numbers, and also the impact on the other side of the scale with things like MAID, assisted dying,
yes,
anything. And, I have to, sorry, I'm going to be political here. I get very irate every time the Minister of the Status of Women stands up and says over and over again, we hear this from the other side of the floor, women are still carrying the majority of the burden of the family,
mm,
right?
yes,
Just go, the most important resource we have as a nation,
yeah,
and that's their mentality. That's,
yeah. Yeah, isn't that it's tragic. It's
it is.
tragic.
Yeah,
So we miss out so much.
yeah.
So there's lots of questions coming in,
Okay.
Kathy.
I'll try and be more succinct.
No, no, not at all. So this is from Roland. He says, have any clerical Catholic authorities written any letters of support for this proposed legislation? So are you getting, I know you mentioned the Vedic and the Sikh
Right.
community. Are you getting support from other faith, communities, Muslim, Catholic, Protestant?
It's out there and I see it in different ways, but as far as directly sending a letter of support for C-233, those are the only 2 that I've received from religious
Okay.
organizations. And,
Okay.
I think it's because, a lot of times they don't realize the significance of that because they are out there doing it within their various magazines
Right.
and reaching out to their congregations and all that
Yeah.
type of thing, but not directly to the member of parliament that is,
Yeah,
is putting
we
it
we
forward.
forget about that,
Yeah,
actually. We
yeah,
forget we need to be, writing and supporting you, as well as getting our constituents,
yeah.
going,
Well,
and
the work that you do one-on-one individually as your supporters go out and reach out to that all is phenomenal, phenomenal. The idea of organizations like our churches, uh, larger organizations, simply writing that letter on behalf of, like I know that the Catholic Women's Association,
yes,
one of them said to me once, don't mess with us. We're 80,000 strong,
that's right.
right? And I'm
Mhm.
going, okay, 80,000 names on a petition would be pretty impressive,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
that's
there's
right,
ways that can be done as well.
yeah, and your petition did garner over 10,000 names.
Yes, that was the e-petition, and we did give it a very short window. We could have
Right,
gone longer, but
right,
we were concerned that there would be an election called, and you have to present it if the time isn't up. I wanted to be able to present it before I did my first hour of debate, but the
right.
paper one is still available and can go on
Okay,
continually, and that's on my website as well if people want to go ahead and do more of those, because every time 25 names are there. Of course, as a brand new member of parliament, I thought, oh, I've got 300 names here. I'm going to stand up and present 300 names. And someone who was more seasoned said, you can do that. You can stand up every time you have 25 names. Think how many times you could stand up in the House. And then the Minister of Justice in this case has to respond to each one of those sets of 25.
Right,
So,
right. Wow. Wow.
yeah.
So we've got another one here. Comment. Aaron O'Toole has stated that he will not support the bill. How can the strategy be adapted to counter his stance?
Right. Yes, obviously the best thing possible would have been for him to truly understand this bill and support it. That being said, I have to respect his right to vote his conscience the same as I do. And I really think he is not comprehending what his pro-choice stance is representing. Because as I said, 84% of Canadians, the majority of those are pro-choice. There is another segment of pro-choice, and they are the 16% that are totally fine with abortion for any reason. And that's not pro-choice. That's really, truly pro-abortion. That being said, my approach has been, and I've had lots of questions on it, to say that obviously I would prefer that he support it, but I respect that he has that privilege like any of us on a private member's bill. And so I said, you know, I encourage them to look at the other leaders and the other parties and what type of private member's bill would they ever bring this forward, and would they support it, you know, allow conscience to decisions to be made by individual members. And that's where I quite often blow the horn of pride on my Conservative Party, because we do that.
Yeah,
And Canadians need to see more of that.
that's right. Yeah. That debate happening.
Yes, that's right.
Freedom of conscience.
That's right.
Comment.
I'm still going to work on him, though. I'm still working
good,
on him,
good.
as you guys can as well. You know, just say, please, would you reconsider?
Yeah,
Because you're not really representing the pro-choice community.
that's right.
And if pro-choice people say that, and I have those within my party, right? These are areas that we agree on, and that's why I'm hoping that the vast majority of them will make the decision to support it.
Yeah, yeah.
Working on it. Yeah.
Good. So we've got a comment here from Sherry, and she says, as an emergency nurse, sex selection abortion was practiced since 1998. In the department where I worked, cytotec was the drug used.
Okay.
So I guess more of a comment, but as we've discussed, you know, we know that this is going on in Canada. And
well, and it's getting easier and easier with the drugs that now they're saying you can buy over the counter and take home.
right.
That is such a dangerous thing to do. And now, you know, they were saying this is so wonderful because rural and remote communities can have this option right there. And it's the most dangerous thing that you could do because you're so far away from a hospital. And yeah, I took some hits last night on the fact that there were doctors and people encouraging to reverse that pill. And I'm going, wow, you know, just like other issues, conversion therapy, you know what, you can decide to go this direction. If it's fluid, you can go the other direction as well. Why are we not providing safety for these people?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so one-sided.
Yes.
So I think that's it, Cathay.
Okay.
You've got some, thank you for your courage coming from Colette. God bless you. What is next for Bill 233? That's it.
Right. Good question. Well, this is second reading, and in second reading, you get 2 hours of debate. And I've just had my first hour, so it's split into two. And now I'm back at the bottom of the 15 that are before the House right now. So we're hoping it'll come up for second hour debate around May 24th, assuming there's no election. And then after that debate, there'll be a vote whether or not to send it to committee. And of course, we want to have that opportunity to have medical professionals come and talk about it and individuals that it impacts. And so to even encourage members to vote for it to go to committee so Canadians can see a true conversation on this, I think is another thing that people can do just to encourage them to support it.
Right.
But if it doesn't, that's as far as we've gone. But you know what? It's been 15 years since abortion has been debated in the House of Commons. And I really
Yeah.
believe that this is bringing us forward.
Yeah, it does. It opens a lot of people's eyes to the injustices. So just as a last thing here, where can people get more information and what can they do to help? So everyone wants to jump in. I know we should be talking to our members of parliament. Is there anything else? And I guess people can go to your website, right, for more information?
The information, all of the documents, the various reports and editorials are all there. I would say, you know, also, can you share on social media anything that you can find on the topic, and also reach out to people that you would think are pro-choice and just say, hey, can you support this? Can you call your member of parliament? Because this is something that 84% of Canadians feel there needs to be a law on. I think that includes you. Does that include you? Right? I mean, I do have the trolls that are constantly there that are challenging it, but at the same time, I know it's that critical mass of majority, right, that simply need to realize that they can make a difference on this.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And certainly we're looking for ways to cooperate across these lines. You know, very often people criticize the pro-life movement and say, well, you know, you're too polarized, you know, and we should be looking for common ground.
Right.
And I see this as a common ground issue, you know. So we really need to make the most of that and
Absolutely.
reach out to people who are pro-choice or pro-abortion, as you say. So good. So you've got lots of people writing in and saying, way to go, Cathay, stay strong. You and this issue are in my prayers. This is coming from Jan and the other from Harold and Darlene. Thank you for this presentation and for your courage. So I think you've got a lot of people praying for you, Cathay. We're behind you. Thank you so much for stepping out and thank you for your courage on this. And we'll do what we can with our people from LifeCanada. And again, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you. And I do need to say thank you for the prayers. You know, being in the house yesterday, and my husband mentioned this, it's a spiritual battle.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a spiritual battle. And you can see it in the hearts and the minds and the eyes of such anger. There's got to be an awful lot of hurt and guilt or whatever. I don't know. But, you know, to not be able to have a conversation in a reasonable way, you know that it's beyond just person to person. So thank you so much for your prayers.
Yes, yes. And we'll keep them going.
Okay.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks for everyone attending tonight. And God bless.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.